live TV. It's being broadcasted. We're streaming live now, and it's 9 p.m. every Tuesday. Welcome to the program. I am the host for Project Zainab Ruhi Rizvi, and today we have Sister Farzana Karawalli, who's joined us on behalf of 786 Online Counselling. Sister Farzana will introduce herself. There's so much more to talk about. So Sister Farzana, hopefully, inshallah, will be happy to introduce herself. But at the same time, just for future reference, we will have questions during the program. So it is interactive. I'd be extremely grateful if people can leave an asterisk to let me know if they want to unmute so they can ask Sister Farzana direct questions themselves, as opposed to writing the question in the chat box. This will allow me to give Sister Farzana time to speak about the subject in great detail. Thank you so much again, Sister Farzana, for joining us. We welcome all our guests who are viewing. Please share the word. Every week we will have programs in relation to what's happening in the community, how best to help your family, whether it be through health and well-being, but also in other ways as possible, because that is the objective of Project Zainab, is to make sure that we have a healthy community, healthy family and a healthy community, inshallah. So I would ask Sister Farzana to introduce herself, and bear in mind, I need to see the asterisks in the chat box so that you can join in the program. It is live and interactive, so that we don't disturb Sister Farzana during the program unnecessarily. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for inviting me today on your show. So the title is The Impact of Personality Disorder. So there'll be a lot of things that we'll be discussing around personality disorder, and yes, questions would be great to make it more interactive. But to start off with, I'll just start off with a bit of an introduction and see how we go in terms of questions. So as an introduction, I work for 786 Online Counselling. By profession, I'm a social worker, a learning disabilities nurse, and I'm also a holistic therapeutic life coach. So obviously with that experience, I've come to realize that in some ways we've unconsciously learned to give more attention to our body than to our mind. Just by the way that we live, since a young age, if we fall over and we go and we hurt ourselves, we'll go straight to the medical room and we'll get some kind of aid for the physical wound that we've experienced. We know very much how to manage our own physical health from childhood till now. But if we were called horrible names, or somebody really hurt us and gave us a really deep emotional wound, what would we do with that? Would we go to the medical room and get some kind of support, for the emotional wound that we've had? Will we tell somebody? Will we offload it? Or will we kind of bury it deep within us and maybe just ignore it and walk off? And I think these are the kind of things we need to be thinking about. And you'll kind of see why as we go through the topic. So I think what we need to be looking at is, particularly if you look at COVID at the moment, and we look at how we've been told to manage our hygiene, physical hygiene, wash our hands, keep our distance, obviously maintain our hygiene to a great standard that, we won't get any form of infection. But we're also experiencing emotional disturbances as well during this time. We're experiencing feelings of loneliness, neglect, isolation, and rejection to some extent. Because we are separated from people that we love and we care about. And it's quite hurtful to some people, particularly if they're on their own and they're lonely. I think what we need to be doing is also looking at our emotional hygiene. So as we started talking about children, I think I'd like to continue to talk about children for a bit until we go into adulthood, to understand the emotional needs of people as we progress through life. years ago, we didn't have as many diagnoses as we have today. A lot of people say to me, well, I've never heard of this before. Why are we seeing people diagnosed with this problem and this problem? We'd never heard such a thing. It's like a new craze to have these different names and labels. And what we're seeing, though, is that these labels are also being put on our children. There's many different diagnoses that our children are now are being given. Mental health diagnosis, maybe related to behaviour and other kind of issues that may be experienced at a young age for children. So I'll give an example of myself. When I was young, well, still, I was struggling to actually learn and understand things. And as I grew up, I tried to find ways around. I knew I was different. I knew I was struggling. I knew I wasn't the same as everyone else. And yes, it had an impact on me emotionally. It even had an impact on me in terms of friends and things like that. But I didn't know what was wrong with me until I got to university. I was told, well, you're dyslexic. And it was that kind of aha moment. But then I think to myself, that diagnosis of dyslexia, did it make any difference? I had already become resilient over the years in terms of trying to find ways around that around that difficulty of understanding and learning. I had learnt different skills, different from other people, on how to kind of manage the issues that I was facing. So it makes me think, do we really need the labels on kids at a young age? And that is a discussion to be had. So I'll give you another example is that we've got ADHD, for example. There's the diagnosis of ADHD, and a lot of children that experience ADHD may be given medication to manage the ADHD. They will be given maybe antipsychotics to control their behavior. And to some extent, they may become quite dependent on the antipsychotics, depending on how long this medication is being given to them. And why do we do this? Well, because the children don't respond and behave in the way that we want them to behave. They don't act to the norm. And this is something that myself, and I'm sure yourself, Ruhi, Sister Ruhi, you've learnt in nursing, because I've learnt it in nursing and social work, the theory of normalization, which is one of the first things we learn in nursing and social work, and why we have a normalized society. That is a topic for another day, but I'll be using the word norm quite a bit through my conversations to show how society has tried to create a normal way of living, and then anything outside of that is different. And that can also, anything outside of that is also going to experience some level of stigma. So with our children that may be experiencing ADHD, they're not conforming to the normal way of behaving, the way we expect that kids should behave, whatever that is. And because of that, and because we find that their way of behaving is different, we would look at how we can manage it. Sometimes their behaviors are suppressed through medication. Sometimes they're managed through medication, but they also need a lot of other types of intervention. And are we giving them that support and intervention that's needed through schools, through home, through many different channels? So as we're on the topic of ADHD, for example, I will go into a few questions I'd like to ask you. What is behavior? What do you think of when you say behavior? Do we have any questions? I mean, do we have any anyone that wants to answer? What comes to mind when we say behavior? I guess no one wants to answer that.
I guess some of it is maybe linked to the medication itself. I think some of the behaviors may be side effects to that. But it could also be something that's kind of and something that they feel is a natural behavior for them, something that hasn't been stopped, or something that has been continuing because somebody has never felt that there is a need for them to stop behaving in a certain manner. But we have another question coming up from.
I can see, there's some statements there. So he said that it could be anger and it could be a reaction to, I missed that one.
Yeah.
To the medication.
Is there a brother, M, who wants to ask a question? You can unmute yourself.
It could be a reaction to the, it says it could be reaction to the surroundings that's affected by somebody's feelings. So that's very spot on, actually. Behavior is actually somebody acting out. So that's a spot on answer. It's somebody acting out, and we have to ask the question, why are they acting out in this way? What are they trying to do? When we act out, we're communicating. Yeah. So if somebody doesn't understand us, say, for example, we are unable to speak for whatever reason as adults, which there are many people that are unable to speak or to hear. And so maybe they'd use sign language or any other form of communication. Now, that's acting out to some extent, isn't it? It's acting out to communicate.
Would you also say it might be someone trying, someone's, a child's way of calling out for help?
Yeah, definitely.
And attention, or using that as a form of getting some form of attention to themselves.
Maybe we are assuming it's attention to themselves, but they innocently are just trying to find a way of communicating with you, and to see at what level you will actually listen. So it could be that behavior could be as a result of trauma as well. So some kind of learnt behavior, some kind of trauma that they've seen, and their ability to cope and manage. And really what we need to understand is how the environment that they're in, maybe it's the school they're in, maybe at home, anywhere, how the environment is also impacting on their ability to communicate. So there's a lot of questions. Go ahead, sorry.
I know bullying is one of them, and the child doesn't. Young boys tend not to try to call attention to themselves, because they don't want to have parents give them back that feedback. Give them a feedback to say, why didn't you fight back?
Yeah.
So one of those kinds of things. So they may not do something that is normal, or what parents may observe to be normal, but they may be doing something or saying something. I think it's a case of deciphering what your child is trying to say to you,
exactly,
through any kind of signal that you see, that you perceive to be a lot different for them.
Yeah, definitely. And through that, they will learn to regulate their emotions and regulate how much they seek attention through the way that you communicate back with them. And that's not always the case. This is a generalization. There's different levels, different issues, and unless you know the issues, we can't be prescriptive in any way. This is just, a rough generalization. But what we need to think about is why are we not trying to find out how that child will learn and understand? What ways can we support them to function within the environment they are in, with the difficulties that they're facing in communicating? What are we doing about that? Rather than trying to conform them to a norm, how are we supporting them? So, for example, if there's somebody with a learning disability, we know straight away they've got diagnosis of a learning disability. We will see, is the environment suitable for them? Should we take them out? Should we give them extra support? Should we give them one-to-one? And initially, I don't think children with ADHD were giving that same level of support, but now, as time has gone on, they are starting to get that kind of support now. So we just need to be a bit more mindful. And the reason why I'm saying this is because if there is any kind of trauma or any kind of issue or that started out as a young age, and we're not dealing with it and we're not managing it very well, then this is when we start to see the behaviors progress throughout life and actually get more complicated as we go along. Now, I'm not a clinician, so I'm not going into the details of any disorders in particular today, but what I will be going into is the effects of disorders, right? So what we need to learn and what we need to teach our kids is how to gain insight into themselves. how to ground that child to understand their own reactions, their own, what is showing up as behavior. Now, that could be through sensory means. There's many different means to try and get a child to become grounded and gain insight into themselves. And you'd need, obviously, support with that through maybe counselling. Even schools provide a lot of support as well. And it's worth having those discussions with the school so that they can teach you methods as well of how to ground a child and kind of help them to settle emotionally and help to regulate their own emotions.
Sorry, can I just interject here? Is that, you know, in different cultures, people see seeking help from other people as some kind of a weakness to say that they are bad parents. And I've come across that in my own kind of professional capacity. But I just wondered, you know, should parents feel as if they're bad parents, or feel as if they've neglected their child, and that's why they're having to seek support from an outside, you know, as somebody, you know, outreach workers or other people who are working in the profession? Because I know that in itself is kind of, for some people, is like admitting some kind of weakness within their home. And a lot of people like to put up a face in the community to say that, you know, they're perfect, they're, you know, they're wonderful parents, they're wonderful family. But then they come across this kind of issue where one of their child is not perfectly, you know, doing well, as, you know, according to their kind of setup. So, you know, should we, you know, try to access as much support as we can without having to feel that burden?
We should. And again, that goes back to what I was saying before about normalization. So what is a perfect child? What is a perfect family? Where is this all come from? You know, why are we saying that something is perfect and something is not perfect? Who's the one to say that one child is not perfect, or I'm not perfect? So because I've got dyslexia, I wasn't a perfect child, I'm not a perfect adult. Is that the case? You know, I honestly don't believe that that is the case. We really need to be thinking about how we self-stigmatize because we don't fit into what we think society is saying we are. Yeah, we also stigmatize others. I mean, I guess that's a topic for another day, which is a very large topic.
Absolutely.
But yes, stigma is a big issue within our community. And we really do need to be, and again, these labels are exactly that, right? We label somebody ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without even having any kind of clinical diagnosis. We've decided that somebody is a this and somebody is a that, you know, and we've already named them. That's not acceptable. I think we really need to be thinking about what are we professionals to be able to say that? Do we know enough about the person? And we have to be really, the problem is if there's stigma, people aren't going to access help.
Yeah. The other thing I had in mind was, I think a lot of people, families especially, have kind of thought that norms are something when they've compared themselves to other people, and then they believe that, you know, if something is not happening with them, then it's okay to kind of say, okay, that's not the perfect family, but we must be. But at the same time, the other issue is we've set our own timelines. A lot of people have set a lot of objectives, but they're very kind of very tight, holding on to timelines. And if something isn't working out, we know, I mean, me and you both have worked in professions with pediatric children, so in that kind of capacity, but you know, families tend to kind of push for a perfect kind of child growing up. He must be walking at this time, he must have his teeth at this time, and then we kind of, that is how we're actually stigmatizing our own children, and we don't even realize we're doing it. If a child is not walking by the age of, say, for example, 9 to 10 months, he must be abnormal. There must be some kind of disability going on there, and so on and so forth.
Definitely. So I just want to move on to, because I know we don't have that much time, I just want to move on to where do these personality disorders stem from? I just wanted to initially give you a bit of a background into emotional well-being of children, and then you'll see how it goes into adulthood. So our personality is a collection of our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors. And all of these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors help us to feel unique, which kind of links into what you were saying, Sister Ruhi. We don't always think and feel and behave the same as others. Yeah, we think of ourselves as different, we behave differently to others, but we try to still fight to conform within the norm. Yeah, and there's a lot of factors within our environment and within our upbringing, and sometimes within the circumstance and situation that we're in, that changes the way we behave. So, for example, if you've grown up in a very difficult household, or you were bullied in school, like you'd mentioned before, then, you know, the way you behave would be different to somebody that's not bullied, right? Or not brought up in a difficult upbringing. If you are an adult and you've lost your job, and there's a lot of stress, you've got bills and things that you need to pay, your behavior, the way you present yourself, the way you speak will change. Why? Because of the amount of stress you're under, because of the 101 things that you're thinking about, you know, all of these different situations, feelings, emotions, environments have an impact on how we behave, right? And one of the things that I've learned as a nurse and a social worker is that we need to live we need to be more accepting, like we'd said before, within an environment to be able to support people. Yep. If we're able to do that, then there's less stigma. Instead of kind of shunning people away when they're behaving in a particular way, if we reach out to support them, then there's a chance that we can be part of a change of stopping stigma, but also making change in that person's life. They will then reach out for support.
If they healthier change.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we can change an environment for somebody as well. We can reach out to them. What we end up doing is we judge somebody instead of supporting them. We see their behavior and we judge them. And when we judge them, what we do is we make ourselves distant from these people, and we kind of give our opinions to others as well. That's all part of the process of stigma, and all part of the process of causing that person to then change their behavior further. So this is what the there's a cycle called the Pygmalion cycle. It's a cycle of effect. So basically, our actions, because of our beliefs, have an impact on somebody else's actions, and those actions then have an impact on their own belief. I hope that makes sense. And what this does is it causes change within that person, the person that we have put our actions onto. We've caused a change in their behavior further. And when their behavior changes, it then has a further impact on us. And then we will behave in a certain way towards them again. And it's a whole cycle. And what will happen is this kind of behavior will spiral out of control over time. Mm-hmm. And we hear people say, you know, why can't you just accept me the way I am? Now, accepting a person and accepting their behavior are two different things. We may love somebody, but we may not love their behavior. So what we need to do is differentiate, just like we do with children. We differentiate the behavior from the person. If we differentiate the behavior from the person, we can then help that person. We will want to help that person to try and change their behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, you know, a lot of this is how people kind of come about with these different personality disorders. If it's not treated and family has kind of discarded members of their family without actually recognizing that there's a call for help, or there's some kind of form of therapy that child is required in their earlier time when they've kind of just started to kind of started to show its appearances whilst they're talking, during conversation, through their behavior and attitude. If it's not dealt with in early stages, then this is what kind of stems into, a certain personality disorder, which obviously we can't give names to, because I think with personality disorders, there's far too many to discuss. But these are things that actually impact somebody into, having some form of disorder, and it may not be something that we can actually label, because there's so many personality disorders that have so many different characteristics, and we don't have the one size fit all type of one type, that fits everybody. And there's very similar character, we can't characterize somebody is getting angry, so he definitely has a personality disorder. That anger is coming from somewhere, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they do have personality disorder. It just means that there's something that's just turned them totally irate for some other reason. So there'll be a lot of people that will probably be thinking, but some of the characteristics that have been described means that my husband, wife, sister, brother, mother, and what have you, have got some kind of disorders. And that is exactly what you're saying, is it's not necessarily that. But having said that, it can become that if things aren't managed earlier.
So that shows that we're on a spectrum.
Yeah.
Yep. So personality disorders are at the one end of the spectrum, but there are traits throughout this spectrum, and we could have any one of these traits throughout, through the spectrum. There might be some of us that are kind of shy and, try to socially isolate ourselves because we're a bit shy about being. That doesn't make us, it doesn't mean that we've got personality disorder, but we have some of those traits maybe, somebody that's very arrogant, somebody, and a lot of these traits are there. They're designed so when we have small traits, these traits are there for a purpose. So for example, if we're very confident, overconfident, not to the extent of a personality disorder, but just more confident than normal. The reason for that is that it allows somebody to be able to do something different from others, to be able to progress, to be able to maybe become a leader. If we were all nervous and scared, we will never have leaders, right? There would be nobody that would be ready to step up and take control, but if we were all leaders, there'd be nobody, on the ground to do the footwork. So we're all given different feelings, emotions, and traits naturally to be able to progress in a society through where we need to be in society, within our positions, within our roles. And I think we need to understand that we are all on a spectrum. It's not about he, she. The only time that we need to look at, if certain signs appear, then we need to start thinking about how can we support this person before it gets worse, like you mentioned. So let's look at what are personality disorders. Yeah. So like I said before, personality disorder, just like the other labels we spoke about earlier, is just a label for the behavior that's being expressed. Okay. But obviously when it becomes a disorder, a clinical disorder that's being clinically diagnosed, this is a label that's given by a clinician, a medical professional, because they have done particular tests and assessments at such length to understand this person, and then that label is put on them. So it's not fair for us to start just labeling people left, right, and centre.
Could I just quickly interject? We have a lot of people that kind of go through the Google website, and Google has become the doctor of all for all these days, and people, without seeking clinician support, they find that they are self-diagnosing through Google, and oh God, I must be this, I must have bipolar, or I might have this, or this person must be narcissist, or this person. I mean, surely one can't be doing all of that without actually, either being in the profession or really having that kind of education to be able to sit there and diagnose other people or diagnose oneself. And it doesn't all just come from, like I mentioned, there could be so many different characteristics which kind of fall and kind of bracket away with everybody else, but then they kind of fall out of that bracket, but there might be one missing and one, and people think it's all tailor-made and it's all sitting there all in Google's head, and yes, I have it.
Very true, very true. And actually, even, I mean, the topic of labeling generally is controversial, even at the level of when a clinician has labeled somebody. We never used to hear any of these labels before. When I was growing up, I never heard anything. My parents have never heard of certain labels. You'd hear about some mental health conditions, but, you know, personality disorder labeling, we never used to hear very much before. It's something new. And that's why I would say, well, you know, not everyone is accepting of these labels, and it's a bit controversial to some extent. And so this is why we need to kind of move away from the stigma and actually reach out to help people instead. So a personality disorder, you'll notice, is when somebody becomes very rigid in a particular way, when they're not very flexible in change. So when you go to help them, they're just not accepting of help. They're very rigid, that this is the way things are done, this is the way I will continue to do it, this is the way I will continue to behave. There is sometimes a very unhealthy pattern of thinking as well. Like I said before, their behaviors are deviating from the norm. Yeah, like I said, with children that are being labeled as well, it's the same thing. The behaviors are different from the norm. They're deviating from a normal way of behaving. Now, what is normal? Society have just decided what a norm is collectively. But, you know, some people may not be a particular way because of the experiences they've had, like I'd said earlier, right? So I'll give you an example. A lot of people that have a personality disorder may have issues around thinking very negatively, right? So the example is, you know, we hear about the, you know, half a glass, the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. So somebody with a personality disorder may think the more negative, the glass is half empty. Whereas somebody within normal society, which is something I really don't like to say, I really hate, which is why I'm going like this, but somebody within normal society or within the normal range of the spectrum would say the glass is half full, not empty. They would be more positive than negative in their understanding, in their experience. Now, it could be the person is saying the glass is half empty because maybe they were neglected as a child and they never had the opportunity to see a full glass. You know, this is just a wild kind of example, but there are many different, there may be small things to some, but might be meaningful to others that have an impact on you as a person. Yeah. So the personality disorder can also affect people by, like I said, the way they think. They might be more negative, they might be irrational, they may be very, we might think of it as aggressive in the way that they express their emotions. They may well be, but before a diagnosis is put in, we need to not presume that they are very aggressive. We must ask the questions as to why they are aggressive and why they are behaving the way they are, so we get a better understanding.
Usually it's with history, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you get a kind of a history, you kind of understand where that person is coming from. And then you can work on that a lot better.
Definitely, definitely. But we're not clinicians. It would be the clinician that would gain this level of history. But it's obviously trying to get somebody to accept the support to start with. So somebody with a personality disorder may also struggle to relate to other people. Yeah, they may have issues with social interaction. And they may be very impulsive and out of control. I mean, these are things that you recognize at different times, but that doesn't mean the person has a personality disorder, because there's, like you said earlier, there's a range of different issues that we will see, and we'll go into that. So there are 10 types of personality disorders, and they're in 3 clusters. Yes. So there's, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because, like I said, I'm not a clinician, but this is just to give an example of how complex this topic is. So there's 3 clusters. Cluster A, people that may have disorders that are under this cluster A would be acting maybe odd or eccentric. Yeah, there might be issues around trust. There might be issues around emotional expression as well. And these clusters, actually, they're all, so somebody could have a mix of clusters. They may not fall just under cluster A, they may fall under cluster B too. So then how are we able to know what the diagnosis is? It's very complex. So cluster B, people with a personality disorder that may fall under cluster B may be kind of more dramatic, may be very emotional, and may be very erratic. Yeah. And then there's cluster C, where the people that fall under cluster C may be more anxious, particularly in social settings, like I'd explained on the continuum, that on the spectrum, that somebody that's shy, you could mistake them as somebody that's got personality disorder, but they could just be shy. So we shouldn't really be making those assumptions. They may also be fearful. Yeah. So like I said before, these clusters, it doesn't mean that somebody with a particular personality disorder, I don't want to name any personality disorders because I don't think that's appropriate for, for us. That is a professional thing for clinicians to discuss, but it's not for us to be able to discuss the actual different personality disorders. I think what we need to concentrate more on is the impact and the issues that we see from these personality disorders, right? So what do we mean by a personality disorder? Well, we find that a lot of mental health issues are caused by a disruption in the brain's chemistry, right? So that's where we have kind of depression, anxiety, and things like that. Some are genetic, some are, like with personality disorders, can be developed because of experiences we've had in life. But whereas a personality disorder, it's actually where there are patterns of thinking or behaviors and things that have developed because of experiences, which is why at the beginning of this, in the introduction, I spoke a lot about experiences and the impact of experiences on somebody, right? So a personality disorder is not because of a chemical imbalance in the brain, it's because of experiences that have happened, patterns of experiences. So it might be repetitive experiences that have kind of embedded into that person's personality as they've grown. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So there might be, like I said, several traits of the disorder. It doesn't have to be one trait. It is very complex. And these traits are causing dysfunction for this person in life. So this person that has a personality disorder is struggling to function within society because of all these traits. So the traits could be, like I said, they could be quite dramatic. They could have anxiety because it could be mixed. And all of these traits are making it very difficult for this person to function within the normal society. And that's when normally people that feel that they have a personality disorder actually go and try to get help. Yep. Whereas you and I could have personality traits such as some level of OCD. We hear that word banned about quite a bit. And I know I have those traits too, but that doesn't mean that I have a personality disorder. May have, may not have, but do you know what I mean? There are lots of different traits that we have. That doesn't mean that we have a personality disorder. Personality disorders can develop also through learned behavior in somebody's upbringing. So I'll give you an example. If somebody, 3 generations back had lost their parents and they grew up as orphans, they had to learn to fight for themselves. It could have been in any of the countries back home. It may not have been here. They had to fight for trying to maintain their finances to be able to live and eat. They could be very young. They have to be able to function within a society where people would not regard them as anyone because of stigma. Stigma of becoming an orphan as well, to some extent. People would not regard them, support them, reach out to them. Or on the other hand, they were treated like they needed charity, but they didn't want that feeling. So all these kind of emotions have an impact on this person as they're growing older. So they may decide, you know what, I'm going to beat this. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live within these emotions that are engulfing me of what people in society are treating me as, my circumstance. Can you see there's a whole load of issues going on? There's the environment that they're living in. There's the community and their reaction towards them. There's their circumstance and their own internal fight of trying to make themselves something. There's
what about sudden change in their life that they haven't been prepared for? Does that kind of lead to
the shock, right?
Yeah, shock.
And having to pick up a
That's
pace.
also very traumatic,
function.
Isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah. So that kind of trauma, as that person grows older and they have kids of their own, they may be very hot on, you know what, you need to start budgeting. They'll be telling their kids, you need to budget, you need to eat very little because you need to conserve. It's because they've grown up in an environment where they've may not have had meals every day. So those behaviors haven't left them and they've kept those behaviors. So they've started to show levels of stinginess and things like that. Not because they are stingy, it's because of the way they've grown up and they've had to, put every penny together to be able to function and live. Yeah, they may have disregarded their emotions. Like I said earlier, a lot of people are spending more time thinking about their physical well-being. If they get hit or hurt or bruised, they will spend time and make sure that that cut is healed. They'll put the creams on, whatever's needed. But emotionally, they've neglected that. If you've got bullied, if you've lost your parents, you've emotionally neglected that and moved on. Sometimes we haven't dealt with that pain. That will also come out in when we're bringing up our children. Those kind of emotions will lead how we bring our children up. The experiences of not having money will come out in how we bring our children up. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What we end up doing is passing on some of our traits to our children. Now, unconsciously, those children have picked up these traits and thought, this is life. This is normal life. Now, that person was not seen as normal in society, but this child sees this life as normal. And in society, it's not seen as normal. This child will then grow up to pass on many of their traits and more that they've gained over their lifetime onto their children. And as that third generation grows up, that third generation will also be taking in these traits, their own traits, and they will think it's normal, but society don't believe that they're normal. And this is how sometimes personality disorders can develop. They can be handed down through parenting. So sometimes parents could be not knowingly neglectful. Sometimes they could be neglectful on purpose. We do see that there are abuse cases and things like that, which we need to be mindful of as well. So there might be parents that have abused their children or neglected their children on purpose, because of whatever pain that they've gone through that they haven't dealt with. So this is a very complex issue, as you can see, and all of our emotions have a knock-on effect on others, and that has a knock-on effect on somebody else. And that's where the complexity comes in and the disorders can start to develop if we haven't dealt with them early on.
Other than behavioral aspects of disorders, would you say there's any kind of a result in it being a genetical disposition?
I'm not a clinician, but from my understanding, I don't think there is. I think when it comes to a personality disorder, it is usually a cycle of behavior, an understanding of behavior. And it's about how conscious we are in the environment that we're in. So a lot of us that may have traits may not be conscious of our traits. And those traits will then manifest, maybe, if we are not conscious of them, if we're not comparing them with, well, that's not normal in society, maybe I need to, calm down on my shouting a bit, that's not acceptable in society. But if you're not aware that you shout,
It's very
if you're
difficult to
not
do something
aware
about
that
it.
you hit out, if you're not aware that you're abusive to somebody, how do you change that? And if that progresses, it's become a disorder to some extent, right?
Yeah, I was just wondering, a lot of people do not socialize, and a lot of these behaviors would be behind closed doors. Would you say that these kind of behaviors at home will never kind of see the daylight, really, because they haven't socialized, they haven't seen what other people, for example, or they have maybe the negative trait in all aspects of their behavior, but they'll never succumb to the fact or reflect or be able to reflect on their behavior because they haven't seen a comparison.
Exactly. So I think also with the personality disorder, what we find is if there's a problem within a relationship, what they may end up doing is just further limiting themselves rather than getting themselves burnt in some way. So if they come out to try and so, they find they haven't realized they don't have the skills, they've just realized that it's very difficult, so they might further isolate themselves. Or if they do present themselves in the community, they're not understanding that there is an issue there and other people aren't understanding them.
I see. Just one other question that I had was, what can the community actually do? So, for example, I have a friend and I realize that there's a world of difference between my thoughts and her thought processes. And she thinks very negatively. How can I actually support her as a member of the community to kind of see things from a different point of view that might make it better for her? Or am I going to be or when I kind of approach that kind of situation, am I actually putting them down? Am I being, negative towards them just because I want to help? Or how will I be observed?
So in some ways, it goes back to the stigma, doesn't it? That people, they have a perception that if you're coming to support them, it's because you're coming to put them down. So we have to be very mindful of our approach. And sometimes you don't know the person, so how would you do that? And I would just say, just go and sit next to the person and just say, obviously, Assalamu alaikum, and just sit quietly. You don't have to say anything. There'll be silence for a little while. And then just say, oh, how are you? The weather's, normal, just a really basic. Don't go into what it is that you want to go into. Just share that space with that person for a while. You may find that it might be good to mirror that person. That person may say something, then you say something, and slowly start the conversation. A lot of the time we go in and, we ask, are you okay? But that person just takes it negatively. Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with me. Why would you ask? Why would you ask if I'm okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Or put up a guard.
That's come from an experience in the past.
Yeah.
That's not come. And that's why I said before, the person's behavior and the person are two different things.
Yeah. I think a lot of people put up a guard, don't they? Just so that they can keep, protect themselves.
Definitely. And I think we need to not lose sight of the fact that a person is a person, their behavior is their behavior. Now, the problem is, it's when they're unconscious that the behavior and the person fuse together, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
the person has no clue of the way that they're behaving. So it's very difficult to remove them from their behavior. It's like an elastic, it keeps pinning back because they're just not aware. Whereas, Other people, you would tell them that, you know what, I don't know if you realize, but you were shouting. They would be conscious of that. Oh, and then think about it and then reflect on it. Yes, I was shouting. Yes, I did sound a bit aggressive. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. You know, you're aware and you're able to understand what led to it. You're able to think it through.
Yeah, but it's also part of, say, for example, the young people, they pick up a lot of habits from school and things like that, and it's probably a good thing to kind of remind them every so often that, you know, something what they're doing is is not a nice thing, because, you know, they may be kind of talking to you in a way, or they may be rude. And our children do pick up a lot of that kind of behavior from school, because they're openly in the playground, they have that environment, they have that influence. And sometimes we have to kind of see to the problem immediately. Otherwise, you feel that that's just going to kind of kick in throughout their whole childhood into their adulthood.
And that depends on the environment we have at home as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where the comparison comes in, and they see at home, we don't need to behave this way, we're accepted. But
Yeah,
we behave that way in school because we're not accepted if we behave the way we behave at home.
yeah,
But if they see the comparison of a warm home environment where that kind of behavior is not necessary, they will understand and be able to reflect. It's when they're not seeing that difference in environment.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
You mentioned the word reflect, and I wanted to kind of hit on that word, because there's a lot of people, including like ourselves, where we generally have a very, very busy life, and we don't have time to sit there and reflect about our day or who we've met and how we've approached things. Would it be a sensible way to kind of make positive changes?
Definitely. And as you know, as nurses, we've used the Gibbs reflective cycle, and that's something that all of you can Google, Gibbs reflective cycle. It will lead you through a way of thinking. So it's not just about thinking about something and letting your mind take over. It's a very formal and structural way of thinking, which is why it's called reflection, because then you're actually pulling information out from your thinking.
Even in Islam, we're given this kind of, remedy to a lot of our problems, is to constantly reflect. Even when you put your when you put your head to your pillow at nighttime, even 10 minutes of reflection is a good thing. And I think the way, absolutely, because it's with reflection that we form, and then from reformation, then there's transformation. And that's not possible unless you actually begin with the word reflect. And I think it's absolutely essential that, you know, we take out some time during our day, even if it be nighttime or first thing in the morning, even if you feel like how, you know, reflect on what happened the previous day, or reflect for a few minutes just about, you know, how you are with somebody or their relationships. Even relationships is a good thing. But, you know, I see a lot of people that just don't find that time to reflect. And Islam really does kind of push for people to reflect, only because by reflection you can bring about positive changes.
Yeah, definitely. There's something I want to pick up from the last thing you said about the children at school, for example.
Yeah.
So as beings, we are, like I said, we are emotional beings, but we tend to forget that. We have cognition, so we have an understanding, and then we are a physical being. Okay, so so when I say physical being, I will use the word vociferal state, which kind of means that, you know, it's taking into account all our organs and everything, and the feeling that we get within our body. Okay, so I think when I'm trying to think how to put this so it doesn't sound so complicated. So our emotions, they feed into our cognition. Our emotions feed into our mind and the way we think. Yes? And then those feelings from our emotions also feed into our body. So sometimes when we're nervous, you can actually feel your heart rate go up. Yeah? Your body starts to get sweaty. So that's your vociferal state, and your heart rate goes up, and your mind is telling you, I'm stressed. And your emotions are like, oh my God, I don't know, you know, what do I do? You know, all of that works together. one of the things that's in the visceral state is your gut feeling. So your stomach starts to churn. Now, as kids, if we did something wrong, we'd freeze for a minute. We know we've done something wrong. It shows on our face. The gut feeling tells us it's wrong. Nobody's told us, but we know it's wrong. There's that intuition that we call, the gut feeling tells us it's wrong. Now we go back and do it again, thinking it's okay, nobody's seen me, it's fine. And even though your gut feeling is telling you don't take that chocolate, you know your mom's going to get angry, but you still take that chocolate. You've not listened to your gut feeling. By the time you go the 5th time to take it, your gut feeling, your intuition is no longer telling you, it's not loud enough and you're not listening to it, tell you, don't take that chocolate. Mom's going to find out. By that point, you've lost it. And we've done that to ourselves over the years. Yes. So what used to be a gut feeling that was very strong when we were children is not as strong in our adulthood. Why? Because we've suppressed it along the way. Now that gut feeling is what makes us grounded as people. Yeah. And we need to bring that gut feeling back. We need to become grounded again and follow that gut feeling. For me, that intuition is, for me, I feel it's a communication with Allah for me. If there's something that I think is wrong and I feel Allah is telling me it's wrong, I feel that's what my intuition is telling me.
A form of taqwa, right? A
could
form
be,
of taqwa.
I don't know. But I just feel that we need to learn to bring that intuition back into our lives. And the way to do that is to be more mindful and sit within a state for a little while and look for the feelings and the emotions that arise. Are we scared? Are we angry? You know, these feelings will lead us to understand ourselves. And that also should be included in our reflection. And we should not ignore our gut feeling at all. These are the things that will stop us from developing any kind of issue that we aren't aware of within ourselves. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Very complicated topic.
Yes. Just want to say thank you so much. We've gone way past the time that we put forward, but it's been an amazing journey with you this evening. I want to say thank you to the viewers. We haven't completely finished yet. After Sister Farzana, we have Sheikh Hamza Sodagar, who will be talking about his forthcoming series for Project Zainab with regards to akhlaq. And it may not just be akhlaq of ourselves, but akhlaq in the community and how it matters. I think that's one of the very essential topics for us as well. Just before you go, Sister Farzana, I want to say a very, very big thank you to you. You have really, really put, a lot of time into this. You've done a huge amount of preparation for this talk. If there's any burning question anybody hasn't been able to say during the program, you can contact Sister Farzana, through myself or through Project Zainab. Inshallah, your messages will be passed on, so you can privately message us. We hope
even
that
through 786 online counselling.
Oh, definitely, yes.
That's another avenue.
786 counselling, and anybody who wants to utilize their services, you're most welcome to do so. This is our job. We reach out to the communities and we make sure that Project Zainab is doing work, not just for the families, to give you a healthier family, but a healthier community. Thank you so much, Sister Farzana. Looking forward to having you back with another topic, inshallah, for Project Zainab. Now, if anybody can continue, if everybody can stay on board, we have Sheikh Hamza Sodagar.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just to give you a small introduction, Sheikh Hamza Sodagar has been studying in Hausa Seminary for over 15 years in Qom. He specializes in Islamic principles and Islamic jurisprudence, as well as Islamic philosophy. Sheikh Hamza is well acquainted with socio-geopolitics and has a very good understanding of societal issues. I just added that bit there for myself, Sheikh. He is currently a resident alim of Al-Walaya in Los Angeles, USA. And today, Sheikh Hamza will brief us on the forthcoming series regarding akhlaq. There you go.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum again. And I guess based on the conversations you and I had on Facebook, the thought was to discuss something that is relevant to the state of affairs in our families. And as you mentioned, I think earlier, our families are the foundation of our communities. Healthy families mean a healthy community, and if you don't have healthy families, you can't really have a healthy community. And hopefully, that is seen as an important matter to various activists and community leaders, where we can do whatever it takes. There's different measures that need to be taken, part of which is to have conversations, discussions, sessions to discuss matters. And so what I thought when that topic was brought forth, various problems that were mentioned, I don't think I need to talk about specific problems that couples, families go through. So what I thought was to discuss the matter of family from the Quran, and try to look at what insight the Quran gives us regarding this. After all, the Quran is God's book of guidance, and this is the book that is supposed to supply us with everything we need to have healthy lives as individuals, as families, and as communities and societies, and so on. So I wanted to do that, and by saying that, I want to differentiate between even some of the things I've done before on similar topics, or just generally different topics, and the way that this is going to be, and hopefully if Allah gives us the opportunity to do this, it's going to be different. Usually what we do, speakers do generally, is prepare a topic, and so they have a framework in mind, a process that they want to go through. And in order to do that, well, where they come up with that idea, where they come up with that thought, how they get it, if they're Muslim speakers or scholars, probably from some Islamic reference. But the way the material is presented is that there is a direction in mind in regards to that topic, that the person wants to follow. The Quranic verses that are mentioned, or the hadith that is mentioned, or the words of ulama that are mentioned, are selected in a way that it fits into that and into the framework that the person has prepared. That's a style that, if done properly, if the basis of the view, if the reason why the person has come up with that framework is based on the Quran, but in presentation, they go ahead and they present only brief excerpts of verses. That's a great thing to do. It needs to be done. Everyone does it, from the Prophet to the Imams, and we learn from that, and we should be doing that. But the approach I want to take is going to be a different one, and that is that I want the Quran or the Quranic references to be the pivotal point, that central theme itself. Let's look at what the Quran itself wants to present. And the only thing I'll be trying to do is to bring out what I can understand from the Quran. And when the approach is like that, then everyone's focus should be on the Quran, not the points that are being brought forth. The points that are being brought forth by the presenter are simply what they think. But when you focus on the verse, for instance, or the verses that are presented, and you're thinking of what's being said about them, or what's being said that these verses are suggesting, as long as your focus is the verse, then you're constantly checking what the person is saying with what you're finding in the verse. You'll find some translation of the verse, or you'll find some tafsir. You'll think about what you previously heard. This is the thought process that you're going through. Whereas if you're thinking, you're listening to this speaker or to the other speaker, you don't really go through that thought process. You're trying to see what this person is saying. So I'm hoping that in in the series that I really don't know how many we're going to have, because it's going to be a process in the making. So we're going to start with some of the verses related to the matter of family, and we'll see how much we can cover in each of these sessions and how it goes and how I feel and how you feel and how the audience feels about it, and then decide how we're going to proceed and move forward. The last thing I want to say is that the central point regarding family is what creates a family. What creates a family are the husband and wife. That's what is the foundation of a family. Children, if that foundation is created right, the children can benefit from that. So the most important thing that we're going to be seeing in the verses, this is what I've generally understood from the verses, is a lot of talk about the relationship between the spouses, and how they should be dealing with them, with matters of marriage and being together and their relationship. And if that's taken care of, then an environment is created where the children can grow in a healthy way. Now, this doesn't mean that if that doesn't happen, that the children are not going to have a chance. No, that's not the point at all. But if we're addressing this matter, we want to go to that central point and to discuss the matter and to try to see what the recommendations of Islam are, what the analysis of the verses of the Holy Quran are regarding how relationships happen and so on and so forth. So that's, I guess, a brief sum up of what we think that we can start moving towards.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to brief everybody through the voice of Sheikh Hamza exactly as to what we're hoping that will come up in the series. And inshallah, if you have any questions in the meantime that you want Sheikh to kind of work towards using the Quran when it comes to family, and we can call it the healthier family, which is the biggest direction towards a healthier community, as Sheikh has just said. And then we can hopefully, inshallah, move forward to bringing on other chapters of the Quran, which actually work towards adab and other things as well, which are very, very essential in having a good, healthier family. Just wanted to say thank you so much, Sheikh. Hopefully I'll have a dialogue with you with regards to the forthcoming series, in which we'll work out exactly how many how many days we'll require for the series to have a good completion or a conclusion to the series. But I felt it was absolutely essential for our viewers to actually know that we are working towards a healthier community, but it starts with the family first. So just want to say thank you to all the viewers who attended the whole program, from Sister Farzana Karawalli to Sheikh Hamza, and hopefully, inshallah, Project Zainab has so much more in store for you, because our objective is to gain a healthier family, not for your family, to our family, to everybody's families as much as possible. But it means that you have to do all the hard work, which is to tune in Tuesdays, 9 p.m. Every Tuesday, Project Zainab will be here live. Zoom, you can zoom in, you can go through YouTube. We will have the series also recorded for you. We will also have, we will also look forward to hearing your questions. You can privately message me and I can forward those to either the scholars or the professionals working with us as our team. And inshallah, look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Thank you so much, Sheikh.